Good afternoon, Chair Stevens.
Good afternoon. Sorry, I'm a minute late. I apologize.
You're actually the first one here. So,
Oh, okay. Well,
so
there you go then. I
yeah,
guess I'm not late or not
yeah,
as late as others.
yeah. So, we can get started whenever you would like.
Okay.
Whenever we have some more of the board members are able to attend.
And can you remind me what the number for quorum is? Is it four of
It's
us? Four. Okay.
there's only the minutes at this particular meeting, but um, so if necessary, we're able to do go through the items because there's no decision items for today.
Okay. Well, so we'll wait a few minutes and see.
Sounds good.
Good afternoon. We are just maybe waiting on one more person at least, and then we'll get started.
I think we do have a quorum, Chair Stevens, with Director Baca.
Great, wonderful. Well, welcome everyone. As you know, this is the meeting for the Non-Containment Area Air Pollution Mitigation Enterprise, and I'll call the meeting to order. And Darius, will you be doing the roll call?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you, Chair. Director Suniga, Director Holguin,
Here.
Director Wheeler, Director Stockinger is excused. Director Furco,
Here.
Vice Chair Baca,
Here.
and Chair Stevens.
Here, and I see Director Wheeler is, looks like coming online too.
I am present. I'm mobile, so apologies, but I am here.
Oh, wonderful. Well, no, that's fine. We're glad you're here with us. So we will move on to the next item on the agenda, which is public comment. Um, Darius, have you received any indication from anyone that they wanted to give public comment today?
We did not receive any request for public comment.
Okay, is there anyone here who would like to give public comment? All right, we'll just know that will take public comment. We can take it by email. We welcome anyone who's interested in giving public comment to our next meeting. And yeah, we will close public comment then. So the next item is a decision item. It's approval of the minutes from the September 26th meeting. Is there a motion for this item?
Move to approve.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second to approve the minutes. All in favor, say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Anyone abstaining? Okay, that motion passes then, and we will move on to our next item, which is the review draft for the fiscal year 2026 budget. 2026, wow.
It's already that time.
Feels far away, but it is that time, isn't it? Okay, well,
It is
Darius,
that
we'll let you
time.
take it away.
I have Sam Foster from our from the CDOT Office of Financial Management and Budget and Kay Ruska to help me out if I get any of these incorrect, and apologize that we moved around the agenda from what we usually do to accommodate some scheduling items. But an overview of the fiscal year 2026 budget is trying to allocate the the fee revenue and the roll forwards based off of the 10-year plan that was approved by the board of directors earlier in this year with the new programming allocation piece on here. So from an overall overview, the revenue, which includes all of the roll forwards, is around 41 million, 41.7 million, with 41.4 million going to programming and projects, 182,000 for administration and operating costs, and 200,000 continuing in the board contingency fund. There is no debt service from the board at this time. An overview of the revenue that is expected in fiscal year 2026. From the air pollution per ride fee, the fee that is on the transportation network companies, expected around 10.4 million according to current estimates. From the air pollution mitigation retail fee, the portion of that fee that goes to the NAAPME enterprise, around 3 million. The anticipated roll forward from administrative and operating is around 200,000. That is the unused portion of the contingency fund. And then the rest of the fund is the amount that's allocated to the CTAP grants, the smaller grant program, the amount that's allocated to the larger infrastructure grant programs, and then a portion of unprogrammed funds, which Sam, feel free to correct me, is reallocation, not reallocation, it is revenue allocation of funds that came in greater than what was anticipated based on that. So that's allocating those funds in the budget. The primary line item is, of course, programming and projects for the current grant call that is scheduled to go out November 4th, which we'll get to a little bit later in the meeting. 17.3 million was authorized by the board of directors at the last meeting. For future calls for that program, allocating 4.8 million. For the larger grant program, allocating 13.3 million. And then there's no allocation for any additional project support services, and that totals the 41.4 million from the slide previously. From the administrative and operating section, allocating them to 100,000 to enterprise staff compensation, 75,000 for consultant support for various items that relates to administration and operation, 4,000 for Department of Law Legal Services, 2,000 for annual audit, travel expenses 500, and then other miscellaneous operating expenses 1,000, which a total of $182,500 in the administration and operation portion of the budget. And finally, no allocation to debt service, but continuing the appropriation as approved by the board of directors in the 10-year plan of 200,000 into the board contingency fund for use by the board of directors if needed on any of our programs. So that concludes the presentation of the budget. It is a draft budget at this time, so staff will continue to refine the figures currently. If there's any adjustment to it, we'll bring it back when the final budget is approved in February of next year. Continuing any type of revenue reconciliation and keeping those up to date. If there's any amendments to the current budget, staff will bring those forward. We're not expecting any at this time, but if those do come up, we'll bring that forward for the board's consideration. And then, of course, as what happens every single year in February, the board does have the option to take action to adjust the air pollution per mile fee and the retail delivery fee according to inflation per the amount that's allowed within statute. That will occur in February, so it can be reported to the Department of Revenue on March 15th. And fiscal year 26 will start on July 1st, 2025. Happy to answer any questions the board has or any suggestions on the budget, but that concludes the presentation for FY26 budget.
Great, thank you, Darius. Any questions from anyone about the budget? Director Holguin, do you have your hand up?
I do, thank you. My
Okay.
updated and I can't seem to find the new.
Oh, no.
Darius, thank you so much for this overview. I am curious, given that the NOFO has been slightly delayed, do you think that the disbursements will happen this fiscal year?
I think even before delayed, the disbursements of the grants, even if they're awarded, which it is delayed by a month, it may take some time for contracting to create the grant agreement. So most likely awards would have happened early fiscal year 26 anyway. Um, um, so we're making the assumption that those would happen in 26 and would roll forward that.
Okay, so right now the idea is that we're going to roll forward everything, the entire allocation. Okay, just want to make clear. And thank you for that overview of the inflation adjustment, because I think that's going to be, that was one of the questions when I reviewed the documents, and so incorporating that, we'll tackle that when we get there.
Absolutely. We'll have a presentation and a recommended adjustment rate for the board to consider in February as well.
Any other questions? Darius, can you talk a little bit about the roll forward from the unprogrammed funds? Did you say that was revenue that came in higher than anticipated?
I believe so.
And do we?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Do we think that do we anticipate anything for, you know, kind of the upcoming holiday season with those kind of numbers to go any higher than we've anticipated? And I guess we'll look at that, you know, further as it comes to pass, but any anticipation of that?
It's a good question, and it's kind of hard to determine, but every single year, I believe for the past 3 or 4, revenues have come in higher than what was anticipated according to the revenue models on there. With fairly new enterprises, we've seen that a lot in various other funds, and the Department of Revenue collects, especially the air pollution per ride fee on a quarterly basis. So it's kind of hard to tell from a month to month basis how those come in. And that's where most of the funding comes from. That money, where we get those, when that comes in, that is published on the Department of Revenue page. We're happy to bring that forward. And we do also include that in the enterprise budget to actual attachment in the packet. So it's kind of hard to say, but you would expect that with the holiday season, especially on the retail delivery fee, collections are higher in November and December than they are for other months. It's just that our revenue forecasting isn't as sophisticated to look at month to month, and it's more on an annual basis. But we've seen it come in higher than normal on a continual basis, and probably that would happen. And in that particular case, we'll bring that forward to the board once we have any other figures for the board to allocate as appropriate.
Thank you. So we might maybe, let's say, add more to the larger infrastructure grant program potentially if we saw like a significant increase in revenues.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yeah. However, the board would like to allocate those funds.
Okay. Any other questions?
Madam Chair?
Yes, Director Wheeler.
Is there an opportunity, or will there be an opportunity to adjust this model so that we can be a little more predictive about? I mean, or is it locked in the statute? I guess I'm just curious, given that we have year over year overshot what we thought we were going to make. It'd be ideal to be a little more predictive about what we've got, so when we can make decisions about, you know, in advance of how to allocate versus being reactive. You know, government is always knocked over the head for that sentiment. So is there any way to adjust the model? Thanks. With that, I'm complete.
Thank you, Director Wheeler. I can take that question back. I don't know the answer to that, or how the revenue is, how they model that revenue, but I can take that question back and get an answer for the board at the next meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's a good question. Any other questions before we move on to the next item? As we know, we're adopting in February, is that right?
Correct.
Okay. So we have a little bit of time, and we'll get a little bit more refinement on these numbers, before we adopt the budget. So thank you. Well, thank you, Darius. Appreciate that. So we will move on to the next item, which is enterprise budget and program updates.
Thank you, Chair. Again, I would like if Sam or Kay have any thoughts, happy to have them assist as needed. But from this is the current standing for this fiscal year on what's been collected. What's been collected from both the ride share fee and the retail delivery fee, in addition to interest income of items that's in the bank, and what has been spent, which is mainly have been staff salaries and the fees to the Department of Law. We'll note that we are currently using a contract in order to do Spanish translation on some of our documents. So we expect that line item to have expenses just shown in future months. The enterprise has not been invoiced for that yet, but we'll expect that to come forward as we continue throughout the fiscal year. And the contingency reserve fund continues to stay at 200,000. The board has not approved anything for use of that contingency fund. This is the just for note is the FY25 budget if board members are interested in what was allocated previously, which matches the numbers that we have with the roll forwards if folks are interested on our starting point, which is FY25. And then from an enterprise programming update, we'll give a quick update on what we're doing about the small grant program, community clean transportation assistance program, in just a second with some of the items that staff has been working on, but working with the CDOT Office of Communications and the CDOT Office of Policy and Government Relations on the outreach items that were discussed last time. Continue working with a consultant on Spanish translation, primarily of the NOFO, which has been completed, and then on the 10-year plan. I think those are the two primary documents that the board was interested in getting going. Making sure that our website is accessible and compliant with statute. Development of the fiscal year 26 budget, and then an item for next time to wrap up the year, which is the annual report of the enterprise to the Transportation Commission and to the Colorado General Assembly. And that I wanted to see if Kay or Sam have any comments on enterprise budget to actuals, and if not, open to questions on this piece of the agenda.
Okay. Nothing from Kay or Sam, it doesn't sound like. Any questions on this portion of the agenda? Darius, when is the annual report? When does that go to the Transportation Commission and the Assembly?
We plan on putting it into the December packet for the Transportation Commission, which I believe is it's either due the Friday after the meeting or the Friday or the week after. I don't know when the specifics are, but it can only go to the Transportation Commission after the board approves it. And then after that, then we will provide it, send it over to the General Assembly. I think it goes to the House and Senate Transportation Committees.
Gotcha. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. Well, then we will move on to the big topic, Community Clean Transportation Assistance, our small grant program. And I assume people received the email that we did have a small delay, and Darius will explain where we're at. So thank you, Darius.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is good news to go with that. And we did have a small delay, and appreciate the feedback that I got from board of directors in order to accommodate that. And I think having both versions out there worked out well. So we were able to have that available right at the start. I won't spend too much time on this slide. This goes through the the actual NOFO itself on what the specifics were, as that was approved by the board of directors last month, which includes the application, includes all the appendices, includes the scoring criteria in which the board will evaluate applications as they come in. And then includes items such as how to use emission reduction calculators to give the board a sense of how much ozone reduction will be coming, how their project assist disproportionately impacted communities, and how to invoice to be in compliance with state fiscal rules as well. And this is a screenshot of I believe the page 1 of the Spanish version of the NOFO, and we'll be happy to send that out when we post it shortly over the next couple of days to the board with the other version as well. So, but the entire thing has been translated, and we do have proper support in order to have communication with folks who do not have English as their first language, so they can participate if needed in this process. And then this is the revised timeline. It has been, all of the dates have been pushed back 1 month to accommodate the delay, so that way any potential grantees don't lose any time that was originally indicated as part of it. With the NOFO will go out on our website on November 4th. From November 4th to February 25th, it'll be open, and CDOT staff as listed in the NOFO will be available for, enterprise staff will be available for questions as they come up, and we will update a frequently asked questions if certain items come up on a regular basis. And then the deadline is the last working day of February 25th at 5 p.m. to submit draft applications, with final applications due on April 30th. The month of May and early June will be doing the evaluation from staff perspective to do the scoring, and we'll bring forward that to the board meeting on June 26th with an interim report out on at the May board of directors meeting as well, for the board to make final decision, ask questions, and make any final determinations on those as we get those in. And then the board can vote on the determination for those for allocation of funds on June 26th. And then staff will work on getting award notices to the grantees in order to start the contracting process to develop most likely what's going to be an intergovernmental agreement to award the funds to the enterprise, and to get those agreements in place so that way they can start work and they can start billing for reimbursement. So yeah, and so we're going to have I don't think this website's up and running, but we'll have a special page in regards to this that we will go live on at the morning of November 4th. So that gives us, it's already pre-made and ready to go on that morning on that Monday morning, and will be available for that. And then as far as the outreach goes, we've already been in contact with CDOT's Office of Communications to work on that press release and get it out as soon as possible in both English and Spanish. As far as presentations with Dr. Cog, North Front Range MPO and Upper Front Range TPR, we already have something scheduled on November 20th with the North Front Range MPO. Unfortunately, we're unable to travel there. Would like to be there in person, but due to commitments with the Transportation Commission, we'll be giving it virtually. We are also in contact with the email breast with the Office of Policy and Government Relations with the appropriate local government entities in the non-attainment area. And of course, we will have all the items sent to you via the email address and have the website up and running. And we working on other items throughout that time, which includes getting scheduled time with Denver Regional Council of Governments, the Upper Front Range TPO, and then any other potential questions and presentations that may come up as we go and get this going to be able to answer questions and get the word out regarding this as well. Oh, and that's the end of my slide. So happy to answer any questions about the plan so far. Yeah, we'll be ready for November 4th.
Any questions for Darius on this? Director Furco.
No question. Just wanted to express my gratitude to Darius and his team for all the work that they've been doing on this and for really listening to some of the ideas and feedback we had on outreach in our last session and taking all the steps to incorporate it. So just very grateful and pleased to see that.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Director Furco. Any other questions? Darius, at one time we had talked about maybe doing some kind of webinar or something like that. Is that something you're still contemplating?
Yes.
If people,
I'm sorry.
if there's interest for it, I guess. Or...
Yes, we have done something similar with at the Division of Transportation Development with revitalizing main streets or some kind of office hours. I think after we get the NOFO out and after the election, that's one of the things that we'll be working on, especially as we get closer towards the original draft date, so folks can be available to answer questions and be able to have talk through some of the more complicated aspects, which honestly is invoicing, but it is what it is on there. So we have that available. So we'll be taking a look at what would be an appropriate time for staff to have that available for some kind of office hours webinar session and record those and have those available on the website, in addition to frequently asked questions document that we'll update on a regular basis.
Yeah, I imagine there will be some questions about invoicing and how to, documentation that's needed. There might be for smaller communities 2 questions on the emission reduction calculators and folks who might not have used that in particular.
Yep.
So, well, great, thank you. I appreciate that because I think that's an important piece. We want to make sure that people are getting the help that they need to be able to apply for these dollars, and even if they haven't applied for grants like this before.
Absolutely.
Any other questions? Well, I just want to thank all the board members because this was and staff at CDOT and Darius. It's great to be able to get this out, and the delay was to be able to do it in the way we wanted to do it, to have the translations available for people. So it is accessible, and I'm just thrilled that we're on the cusp of getting these dollars out and really making a difference in our communities. So this is wonderful. All right, and I guess, Darius, if folks are hearing as they, when you send us the information and we push it out to, if they're hearing any questions, they can, we can route those to you and make sure that people sort of understand this program and how we intend it to work, what the criteria is, and so.
Absolutely, and we do have the non-attainment specific email address that they can reach out to as well.
Okay.
That can go to that all the staff can access that email address to access and answer questions.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. Any other questions before we wrap this up? Well, I think we're all excited for the 4th, and this is great news. And yeah, it's great. Like I said, it's great news for our communities too, because it's really dollars that haven't been available in the past to really do this really important work. So, bravo. Okay, it looks like we have the Federal Boulevard Bus Rapid Transit update.
And I do want to introduce Ryan Knowles, who is the project manager in CDOT Region 1. And he will give the presentation on an update of federal BRT as it has progressed. And I know that's of interest of the board members. And Ryan, let me know if you would like to present or if you just want me to tell me next and I can run through the slides.
Oh, I'll just say next. That'll be fine.
Okay.
Well, welcome, Ryan. Thanks. And we're looking forward to the presentation.
Okay. Well, thank you, Board of Directors. I'm here with Angie Drum. She's our Deputy Director of Traffic and Safety. She oversees my unit, the BRT program in Region 1. So yeah, today we wanted to give you an update on where we are with the project. I know that we came to the board several months ago, earlier this year, and talked about the program as a whole, but we've made a lot of progress on Federal Boulevard. So we certainly want to update you on that and then discuss some proposals for funding that we think is a good discussion for the board of directors. So next slide. And just go forward there. So we'll jump right into the BRT overview. So just a recap of what we spoke about last time. So Bus Rapid Transit really is a high capacity bus service that has a lot of the elements of light rail. So it incorporates platforms, signature or upgraded canopies above and beyond what a normal bus shelter would look like. Ticket vending machines, fare validation, all door boarding. And the goal of the system really is to improve the speed and reliability of bus service. So it is really kind of on par with what you would see in a light rail or a streetcar, and really is competitive with other travel modes on our arterial state highways, particularly driving. Next. So we have received a mandate from the state legislature to really address the greenhouse gas pollution issue in the metro region. And so as part of that, Region 1 has included in our CDOT 10-year plan $170 million through 2030 to address congestion and greenhouse gas pollution on our busiest urban arterials, which are coinciding with state highways. And so a primary way in which we're doing that is by building up a BRT network that will integrate with the work that Denver and the Regional Transportation District are doing on East Colfax, tie into some of the work that's happening in Region 4, the cities of Boulder and Longmont and RTD as well, and then other regional corridors that are moving forward. And so thinking about how this all fits together, we are really trying to make transit more viable for the commuting public in the Denver metro region, not only to and from work, but also for daily trips, and really providing additional options for folks to move around the system efficiently and fast. Next. So Federal Boulevard is very important in that network vision because it is currently one of RTD's highest ridership bus corridors. So in the entire system, it's second or third following Colfax. Today, the buses on Federal Boulevard experience very significant delays. The number 31 is one of the most delayed buses in the entire RTD network, and it is the primary route that runs on Federal Boulevard. And so our initial work has shown that we believe the ridership can more than double from where it is today. And we see a lot of potential for bringing a small starts grant into this project. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment, but really leveraging a lot of the federal funds that are available through the bipartisan infrastructure law to support this transformative project on federal. Next. And as I mentioned, the groundwork for this project, of course, our 10-year plan, but also there's a lot of regional consensus around the corridors that do need BRT in Denver and the surrounding area. So chief among that would be the RTD Regional BRT Feasibility Study, which highlighted 8 corridors out of 29 that were studied, and Federal Boulevard was one of the top of those corridors that were highlighted. Additionally, Denver and DRCOG have identified Federal Boulevard as an important transit corridor to move into BRT status, as well as the cities of Westminster, Federal Heights, Adams County. And so there's a lot of good partnership on this project that we are bringing together to make the project development happen. Additionally, the design, which I'll talk about here in a moment, was something that Denver took the lead on and completed in 2022. And it really allowed us to move quickly on starting to develop the the project design up to 30% and doing our NEPA review because Denver had already developed a locally preferred alternative. So that was something that really the partnership was able to drive forward and make this project certainly possible by our deadline of 2030. Next. So our project goals, as I mentioned, first and foremost, in all of CDOT's projects is safety. And so we want to make sure that, particularly with Federal Boulevard, which has very well-documented safety issues, is a very dangerous road in a lot of ways, that this project will support our safety goals for all travelers, not just transit riders, but bikes, pedestrians, and drivers. And so we're certainly building safety components into this project. But along with that, we are really focused on increasing the speed and reliability of transit service on the corridor in order to make it more competitive with driving. And so that is really the goal, to bring down that overall transit travel time so that the bus isn't getting stuck in congestion, is running late, and people can expect it to arrive when it's supposed to. Additionally, we are focused on really celebrating and working with the neighborhoods and communities that surround Federal Boulevard. It is probably one of the most diverse corridors in the entire state of Colorado. It has a lot of different types of neighborhoods, a lot of different ethnic and social groups, and we certainly want to, in this 18-mile project, make sure that we are helping the communities that exist on and along the corridor identify and really celebrate the project. And then finally, we are looking at the multimodal connections that exist today and future multimodal connections to help folks get to the route without having to get in a car or otherwise, be impeded by getting to the route. So certainly looking at first and last mile solutions and connectivity for bikes and peds in particular. And then, of course, bringing a lot of the ADA and PROAG issues that exist today up to standard. So those are the goals that we have set for the project. So I'll get a little bit more detail on the design, kind of where those things are landing. Next. Additionally, in the service plan, so today Federal Boulevard has somewhat of an inconsistent service plan across the project area. And I should note that the project area, as I mentioned, is 18 miles long. It extends from 120th Avenue in North Westminster to Dartmouth Avenue in South Denver. And so today there are several lines that cover that span of Federal Boulevard, and there are some gaps in that service, certainly north of Westminster Station, right around 70th and 72nd Avenues. The bus is fairly infrequent, comes once an hour up to 112th, and then there's no service between 112th and 120th. South of Colfax, there is more regular service, but it's split between the number 30 and number 31. That extends down to Evans Avenue. And then at that point, there are a lot of different routes that are going to different places. And so one of the things that we really try to do with our proposed service plan, which you see on the right, is consolidate those services into a more reliable routing structure that basically takes two overlapping routes and makes it so that the bus is arriving at stations in a very frequent manner that you really don't have to plan out too hard. So the north route would extend between Wagon Road Park and Ride next to I-25 and connect on 120th to Federal Boulevard, and then extend all the way down to Evans Avenue. And then the BRT South route would extend from Westminster Station all the way down Federal Boulevard, turn onto Dartmouth, heading east to the Englewood light rail station. And so those two patterns will run at 15-minute headways, frequencies. And in the overlap, they'll be staggered so that a bus will arrive between Westminster Station and Evans Avenue every 7.5 minutes. So, and that was the frequency that the project team, including Denver, RTB, Westminster, Federal Heights, Adams County, really identified as important for this corridor to really move the needle on mode shift. Next. Initially, we've done a lot of work around determining where the bus stations should be. So today there are roughly 75 pairs of bus stops along the 18-mile corridor. And so we have consolidated and combined those into 38 enhanced station areas. We went through a process where we really looked at where the boardings and alightings are occurring today, as well as looking at key destinations in the corridor, future plan development and ongoing development. And then we worked very closely with our municipal partners to identify where stations should be located. And so you can see on the right, those station consolidations in the 38 points over top the two existing routes that I just described. And so we feel pretty good about this station plan. It is roughly on average about half mile overall, but in Denver, it's a little closer to a fourth of a mile between stations. And so the idea there was that when you were going out onto Federal Boulevard, you would never be farther than a quarter mile away from the station. Next slide. We have also been thinking very hard about, our inclusivity as well as our environmental justice and Title VI requirements as part of the NEPA process. And so, as I mentioned, Federal Boulevard is a very diverse and ethnically unique corridor. And so we really went through, we've developed a Title VI analysis, and it's in pretty good shape. I think there's a little more work to do carrying it forward. But the thing I want to mention here is that when we were doing kind of the station area planning, this was a very important part of the overall effort as well. And so as we build the project design, we are really thinking about, what are the historically disadvantaged communities that historically haven't had access to higher levels of transit service, and who may not have access to a vehicle in their households. Where are we providing new opportunities for those folks to get to the places they need, the educational, employment opportunities, recreational opportunities? And so as we move forward in the project, we are really thinking about providing those opportunities and creating new ones. So thinking about connections to other services like the Flatiron Flyer that don't exist today. Those are things that we're continuing to work on. Next slide. So the overall design for Federal Boulevard really features three major components. So first is transit signal priority. So these are technology solutions that'll exist at every intersection on Federal Boulevard that's signalized today. And so basically it's a correspondence between the BRT vehicle, the bus, and the signal controller in the traffic box at the signal. So what it does, it either holds a green as the bus approaches, or it speeds up the cycle so that the bus doesn't get stuck at a red for too long. And so this really helps with improving the speed of the overall service and preventing getting stuck in congestion. Additionally, we are adding bypass lanes and queue jumps in certain parts of the corridor, particularly in the Highlands section of Denver between 20th Avenue and 50th Avenue, where there's a lot of constrained right-of-way. So in this section, we're really looking at the intersections of Spear and 38th to make sure that we have these bypass lanes where the bus can get around queued traffic and really continue on its trip. And then finally, for the rest of the corridor, we are planning on installing side running bus lanes. So these would be bus lanes that are for buses, but will allow vehicles to transverse them to make a turn into or out of a business, a parking lot. So, but otherwise the bus has the through movement, so regular drivers would not be able to use the lane for that purpose. And so that exists on the rest of the corridor primarily. And so what that looks like is repurposing a outside third lane in some places. In some places we will be adding a bus lane. In other places we'll be repurposing shoulder lanes. So really better organizing the existing right-of-way today to facilitate that better transit service. Next slide. And you can see this map just shows kind of how that breaks down. So the yellow sections would be the sections where the bus would be traveling with the rest of traffic in mixed in a mixed traffic lane, but we'll have those bypasses that I described. And then the blue areas are really, the blue and orange are really where the bus will have its own lane, either through a new bus lane or a repurposed bus lane from an existing travel lane or shoulder. Next slide. We have been doing a lot of engagement on this project. So generally speaking, we have a structure in terms of working with our local agency partners as well as RTD. And so we have technical working groups that are specialty focused, so traffic, finance, environmental. Then we have our project leadership team as well as our management team. And so they are more or less combined, but really that's where we're driving daily decisions on the project and then reporting up to our executive oversight committee, which is made up of the leadership of all of the agency partners that we have in the project. So certainly CDOT's leadership, the executive director of the Denver Department of Transportation and Infrastructure, general manager of RTD, et cetera. Next slide. And then in the community, we have been taking a diverse approach to engagement, I would say. So in May of this year, we held our first round of public open houses, and we had 3 at different parts in the corridor. It had pretty good participation from the public. We had about 100 and just under 150 people show up to all 3. We are planning a second round once we have more of our NEPA analysis done, and that'll be held in spring of next year. But most of our current outreach has really been focused on a more tactical approach. So we've been going to a lot of the existing community events and festivals that have been occurring in the late summer and early fall, and doing tabling outreach and talking to people as they show up at those events. Additionally, we've been going to registered neighborhood organization meetings. So those are neighborhood groups across Denver, as well as in some of the suburbs. We've been going to business improvement district meetings, and then also meeting with other organizations as requested. And then we've also just been showing up in everyday life for places that people go. So at libraries, recreation centers, we've put up tables in supermarkets and coffee shops, and really just been available to talk about the project if anyone's interested in learning about it or answer any questions. And we've been publicizing those events as well so that people know if they do want to talk to us in person, they can come and find us because we'll be at certain places at certain times. Next. Generally speaking, in regard to the engagement we received, so people are excited about BRT on Federal Boulevard. I think the questions around the project really come into the details. So people are very concerned about safety. As I mentioned, it's a dangerous road. It's on the high injury network. There are, there's a well-documented history of crashes. And so people really want to know how we're going to address those going forward with this project. And certainly we're looking at various safety countermeasures, including the addition of the bus lanes, but also, looking at cycle timing for pedestrians on crosswalks, possibly some pedestrian refuge islands, hawk signals, things like that. Additionally, there are questions about even more dramatically repurposing travel lanes than we've proposed in the project. So, we have some concerns around potentially causing some pretty negative impacts to the surrounding network, which is mostly local and collector streets in neighborhoods. But there has been some interest from the community about really taking some space that exists today for travel lanes beyond what we've already proposed to facilitate bus travel. And then finally, we've gotten some station comments regarding station aesthetics and locations, amenities, things like that. So we're pretty early in the process of developing the station design. We will have more to share in a future update on that. Next slide. So at the end of August, we applied for a Federal Transit Administration Capital Investment Grant, so a small starts grant, and we requested $149.9 million. As part of that initial application. It's a multi-tiered application process, but this is really the first major part of the application. We needed to develop a more sound cost estimate than we had prior to that. So we're at about 20% design on the project and anticipate that with inflation in the year of expenditure, when we start to build the project, 2028, the project will cost $318 million for that 18-mile long corridor, roughly about $17 million a mile. So we have a financial plan on that, which I'll speak to in a moment. But some of the things that we've really been thinking about in terms of being cost effective and really having a good cost benefit ratio on this project include making sure that the stations are appropriately sized for their context and for the needs of the ridership that we expect there to be, in addition to what is today. So certainly we've tailored our approach there and really tried to make a well-fitting station within the community, as opposed to something that might be a little more prominent. We've also really thought through where the components of the BRT exist, where they will have the most benefits to reducing the delay, and making sure that those components are targeted towards really making the improvement of speeding up the bus, as opposed to just having it for the sake of having it. So that's something that we've really been thinking very hard about. With the service plan I presented earlier, we have really focused on building that with RTD. So it is based on what they've already approved in their Reimagine RTD system of service, in addition to what has already been approved by the RTD board. So it works out to be about a $2 million gap between what they've approved and what we are proposing. And so we're working very closely with RTD to fill that delta, but we feel pretty good about where the service plan is today, and how it will be beneficial for the overall project. Next. So for the capital cost breakdown, which is this slide here, we have pulled together a various amount of sources for funding, and there are some requirements that we have to abide by for the Small Starts Grant. So the Small Starts Grant needs to be below 50% of the overall project budget. We can have a higher share for federal funding, including that Small Starts Grant. So the overall federal share can be 80%, and then the local share 20%, similar to other federal projects, or federally funded projects, I should say. So in addition to the Small Starts Capital Grant, we've identified carbon reduction program funds, as well as surface transportation block grant funds, both controlled by DRCOG and CDOT, as our federal funding package. And that comprises roughly about 75.7% of the overall proposed budget. For state funds, we have 10-year plan funds in the project. We have been in discussions here about potentially using NAAPME funding, and so it would be a pretty significant ask from the large infrastructure program that Darius was mentioning earlier, $30 million. So you see that highlighted in the proposed section there. And then additionally, we have roughly about $5.8 million from our local partners in the project. We expect that will probably grow as the local partners likely will want some enhancements to the base project design that we're currently developing. So overall, we're sitting where we need to be in terms of our shares of federal and state and local funds, as well as our ask from the Federal Transit Administration. We are anxiously waiting to hear back from the FTA on our rating application. Officially, we won't have an answer about what the rating is or what our award will be until the annual report to Congress, which likely won't occur until March of next year because of the change of administration after the election. But we do feel confident in the application that we sent to the FTA. We feel like this is a really good and competitive project when you look at it against other BRT projects across the nation. Next. And then finally, our schedule. So as I mentioned, we made that application in late August, and we expect to hear in the spring about that. In the meantime, we're working on going from 20% to 30% FIR design and finishing our NEPA review. Our intent is to have that completed by the end of next summer. And then we are actually in the next month going to be working on our project delivery selection. So determining the method in which we will deliver the project. And then in the next phase, we will do our final design up to 100%, which would take us through mid-2027. And then the goal is to start construction before the end of calendar year 2027 to have the BRT open for service by calendar year 2030 for the public. And I believe with that, that is the last of my slides. So thank you, and happy to take any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Ryan. Any questions for Ryan on the BRT on Federal Boulevard? Director Holge.
Thank you, Chair. Ryan, thank you so much for this overview. I have a ton of questions. I've been getting a lot of questions about this, and perhaps it's because of my role with the Transportation Commission. So I might set some time just to schedule a few of the questions. But I'm curious to learn about the efforts in terms of speed and reliability. You had mentioned in the areas where there's the constraint right of way. And if you can talk a little bit about that, talk a little bit about the connection between the BRT, the Colfax, where the Colfax BRT will intersect the Federal BRT and that connectivity, because I've had a lot of questions about that.
Sure. Yeah, I can speak a little bit to that, but I think I could also, if we schedule a meeting, certainly add some more detail. But in regard to the constrained sections, which is mostly north of Mile High Stadium, so around 20th Avenue to about I-70 or 50th Avenue. So in that section of Denver, the land use is quite different than what it is pretty much from like Colfax South, where in that Highlands area, it's more residential. There are a lot of historic properties and districts. And then additionally, there are the tree planted medians in the middle, which are loved by the community, I would say. So in order to, there's been some requests from the community to add a bus lane in that section. In order to cause that to occur, we would have to remove one of the travel lanes, and it would result in one travel lane in each direction and one bus lane in each direction. Looking at our initial traffic modeling, we anticipate that would have a very large impact to the neighborhoods surrounding Federal Boulevard in that part of the corridor and drive a lot of traffic diversion into the neighborhoods. And there are, as I mentioned, a lot of local and collector streets in those neighborhoods they're really more neighborhood streets. So we feel that that's an unacceptable impact to neighborhood safety. So we're working through our traffic analysis to determine, there's a little more work to do, but that our initial approach is it would take over 20,000 vehicles off Federal Boulevard and put it into the neighborhoods, and that would be a huge impact to the residents. So so we have though looked at, as I mentioned, adding bypass lanes at the intersections where the bus experiences the most delay. So those are primarily Spear and 38th. And with that, we are able to reduce the amount of time the bus is stuck in traffic, not as much as we would with bus lanes, but a pretty sizable amount. And we do feel that the travel times that results in are on target with the goals of the project. And then the connection to Colfax. So there is a long-term plan to put a BRT on West Colfax. I think it's identified in Denver Moves Transit. I don't know if it is a current priority of Denver's administration because of some of the other corridors they're working on. but it is something that has been coming up in community conversations. And so I think, we're going to be coordinating with RTD to talk about, how buses are connecting to the federal BRT overall. Certainly the 15L, which will be modified once the Colfax BRT comes online. And so there may be some opportunities to improve the service there in the meantime before that project moves forward.
Thank you. One of the, I guess, a follow-up question to the general purpose lanes, repurposing a general purpose lanes, is an alternative being studied where it's for certain hours of the day to ensure reliability? Or is this an all or nothing? Either it's completely converted to a bus or completely general purpose. And then the follow-up to that is, I'm wondering if there's any interest in using cameras to monitor traffic so that when it is, I think the example was used on Lincoln and Broadway, where there is it's supposed to be a bus specific lane, and yet traffic is there all the time. And so I think they're trying to minimize that a little bit.
Yeah, so the first part of your question, so I'd say it is honestly an all or nothing thing. So the biggest impact is during the peak travel periods, primarily in the late afternoon to early evening. And so that is where you would need to have the bus having its own lane when there is the most congestion. Otherwise, the having a bus lane doesn't really make a lot of difference because traffic is flowing in a much better fashion than it is during that time. So in order to have it wouldn't provide much benefit to have a bus lane in the off-peak versus a mixed traffic lane in the peak, if that makes sense. And then in regard to the traffic enforcement, so that is something that we've been having discussions about very early, but we are certainly concerned about, one, making sure that when we do install bus lanes, that the traveling public will follow those regulations. We don't want to put a bus lane somewhere where people are going to ignore it if they get frustrated because they're stuck in traffic. So that is one consideration. But then I would say there have been some talks about potentially adding cameras for bus lane violation enforcement, and we're in early discussions about that.
Okay. Any other questions for Ryan? Ryan, do you anticipate any right-of-way acquisitions that you'll have to get to, or there's not that much possibility for that in this corridor because of it being so constrained?
There are some right-of-way acquisitions that will need to occur. So certainly because of the design of the project as a side running BRT as opposed to a center running BRT, the station areas will require some right-of-way acquisition or easements. And then there are sections of the corridor where we are going to need to resurface the roadway. And then there's a section between Alameda and Evans where we'll need to add a bus lane in addition to the lanes that are currently there. And so those will have some impacts to some surface parking lots. At this time, we're not expecting any full property takes or anything like that. But certainly there will be sliver acquisitions and easements that'll need to occur, as well as construction easements when the project is under construction.
And is that's part of the budget that the cost of the budget, you've figured that in? And then with regard to what kind of buses, I mean, will the same buses be on that route, or is there sort of kind of a redesigned bus that will be operating?
There'll be a new bus on Federal Boulevard. So today RTD runs 40-foot local buses. So we've agreed that the BRT bus on Federal should match the BRT bus on Colfax. So it'll be a 60-foot long articulated bus with the Lynx branding. And so we worked with RTD to figure in the cost of the additional buses that will be needed in their upcoming procurement new articulated buses because many of their buses are at the end of their useful life. But then we also needed to add I believe it was 6 additional vehicles into our request to the FTA to cover the service plan.
Is there any possibility of any kind of electric bus or alternative fuel bus, or is it going to be kind of just your standard bus?
So on opening day, the plan is to have a clean diesel bus aligned with the procurement that RTD is doing, but they are finishing up their low to no emission vehicle plan. So they're working on turning over their fleets to a cleaner source, a cleaner propulsion. And so the way that we're designing the BRT is to work with whatever they choose to go in that route, essentially.
Any other questions? Are you working with businesses along these along this corridor, kind of to I don't know, like a TMO kind of opportunities or kind of commuting opportunities that might arise that you can to promote, make sure that it's successful to have the kind of numbers on. I mean, it sounds like it's a route that has a lot of numbers to begin with, but are there opportunities to work with businesses and do any kind of, better commuting options for people along the corridor?
Yes, absolutely. So we are we have a stakeholder committee as part of our overall engagement strategy. On the stakeholder committee, we have several TMOs. I know Smart Commute is on there, Metro West. So we have TMOs engaged in the project already. But yes, we are working with businesses. Certainly, we're hearing a lot about potential things with the project that businesses are interested in at this early stage, including the construction phase. But we are thinking about kind of like the TDM component of this. Denver has received a grant to do some of the planning around that, and then our Office of Innovative Mobility is also working on a first and last mile strategy for Federal Boulevard, particularly to stand up some recommendations for services like that.
Great, thank you. Well, I think this is really exciting. My daughter used to go to Regis, that's right on Federal. There's a lot of people who commute that corridor, and there are a lot of safety concerns. So I think this is really I think this is going to be a great project. Any other questions before we let Ryan go?
If I could,
yeah, go ahead, Derek. Sorry.
I think some of the conversations on there for the board to consider is how to allocate the funds, knowing that the board is allowed to do grants, and since we have the minor issue where we aren't able to do bonding and on how to allocate funds properly and have that on there, and staff will bring up those items probably as a discussion item in December and future board meetings. And we also have a framework that's already in place from the small grant program where if the board would like, we can borrow from some of the elements as we kind of put together the program on how the board would like to operate this.
Great, thank you, Darius. Director Wheeler.
Madam Chair, thank you. I'm actually also interested in a greater conversation concerning this project. Wonder if there's an opportunity. I know, well, I'll put it this way. I'm wondering if there's just a greater opportunity, whether that's a 20-minute call, 30-minute call. I know that Director Holguin has another slate of issues and concerns to address, but I would be, excellent presentation, but I would be interested in digging into this just a little more. And so I'm just wondering about the possibility of a follow-up conversation. Don't want to put us in a weird spot where if 2 of us are asking for me, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I just want to understand how we might go about getting a deeper conversation on this topic.
Director Wheeler, if I could, Ryan, with your permission, I could connect you through email to set up a separate conversation, and then we can avoid any type of open meetings with 2 board members being together.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Sounds good.
And then if we do that, and Director Wheeler, maybe you or Director Holguin, if you have those conversations, could kind of report back to the rest of the board, just so we know what kind of other questions were asked or maybe Ryan could do just a summary of that conversation to present to the board at the next meeting, just so, we're all informed then, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. Is it better coming from us, Darius, or a summation of the conversations coming from Ryan?
I think either is fine as long as the conversations are not more than two board members present. We can avoid open meeting law, so we can.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, if we can invite Ryan back for the next meeting as well, so either is fine.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Director Wheeler. Any other questions? Director Wheeler, you still have your hand up. Oh, Director Holguin.
Thank you, Chair Stevens. I guess your comment is making me think if there is interest from others. I had a lot of questions, but I don't want to waste people's times. But if there is interest, I'm wondering if perhaps the next meeting can be addressing, and I'm happy to send some of the questions that I have in writing so that it can be a conversation. So also just happy to have that conversation separately as well.
Yeah, I mean, Darius, you can weigh in on what you think. I mean, if we have time at the December 5th meeting, I guess we could do it then. We could also have you guys could have those separate conversations and kind of report back, so just the whole board is informed. I think either way would probably work.
Agreed. The one action item we have scheduled for December 5th is, of course, the annual report, which I don't think will take the entire meeting. And so we can reserve that time now if Ryan and Angie is available, and schedule that time to have a further follow-up on this project in particular and the program in general.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Director Wheeler, go ahead.
And so if I may, I still would like to have that sidebar conversation. Here's my concern. I think we can do both. I guess it's up to their time constraints. But typically when you're giving a presentation to a group, then, it's not that this presentation was rushed, because it wasn't. But there's certainly an interest by the presenter, I would think, to just carry on and not necessarily be derailed. And so maybe the summation is what gets discussed on the 5th. I mean, if no one else is having additional questions, I would hate to, have them come back and do another presentation on the 5th. So I still would like to have the sideline conversation, is where I'm going with that.
Yeah, Director Wheeler, I think that sounds fine. Why don't we stick with that plan, is that you and Director Holguin would meet separately with Ryan to have him answer questions. And then we have that summation at the December 5th meeting. That might be the best way to go.
And they could spark additional questions from the rest of our team. But yeah, thank you. Thank you. All right, thanks.
That makes sense.
We can certainly plan on being here on December 5th.
Okay. Great. So that's how we'll plan that into the agenda then, a summation of those conversations. And if we need to have further conversation, then with a full board, we can do that on the 5th too. All right. Well, good. Great discussion. Good. I'm glad people are, kind of digging into this work and getting more information about this. I think those of you who live in this area or closer to this area have, really probably more detailed, questions and more informed questions than somebody from like me who lives in the north part of this state. So as a reminder, there's no NAAPME board meeting in November. So any kind of holidays you all have, I hope you have a wonderful time. My kids will be just celebrating Diwali. I know some people will be celebrating Thanksgiving, so lots of things. And then December 5th, we will be meeting. Looks like we'll be reviewing the annual report. We'll keep the discussion alive on the BRT larger grant program requirements, and then we'll have at least a summation of the conversations that Director Holguin and Director Wheeler will be having And then just be in touch if you have any other agenda items that you want to touch on at that meeting. Anything else, Darius?
Only that we'll continue to keep the board updated on the small, I want to use his proper name, the CCATP program, including we will send out both NOFOs on Monday with the website. If the press release is ready, we'll send that out or shortly thereafter and do a quick update if anything major has happened between now and that meeting in regards to that.
Yes, well, there's a lot of things, including Election Day, that are happening between now and December 5th. So, you know, I mean, may you live in exciting times or something, whatever that wishes. Maybe not too exciting, but hopefully everything stays calm and peaceful in the next month. Director Wheeler.
Madam Chair, Darius, I also wanted to give volume and mass to the circle back on the model as to whether or not it's adjustable with regard. Yeah, so I just want to make sure that that's coming back on the 5th as well. Thank you.
Absolutely, and we'll come back on that. And I did, while we were having the conversation, did look at the initial estimates in the 10-year plan, which was even done even earlier, and the revised model, what we put into the budget for consideration is higher than what was initially put into the 10-year plan, as well, knowing the 10-year plan is just planning estimates, but it is about $1 million higher. So happy to have that conversation and bring back what we find out in regards to that. So
thank you.
We'll add that to the agenda as well.
Thank you for that reminder, Director Wheeler. All right. Anything else for the good of the order or this group? No, I don't see anything. Then we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for a great discussion, and we will look forward to seeing you all in December, which feels weird to say, but here we are at the end of the year again. So good luck and to everyone in the next month, and we'll see you soon.
All right, be well.
Thank you.
Thank you. You all too.